The wind came in low across the ridge, thick with ice and howling like a thing that had teeth. Snow flurried sideways against the trees, gathering in the seams of the pine trunks like ghosts pressed close together. Elias Gray's axe bit rhythmically into the log beneath his boots. The sun was gone before noon, swallowed by the storm blowing in from the north. Each swing of the blade echoed like a heartbeat across the frozen timberline. He didn't talk to himself. Didn't need to. His breath came in foggy puffs, each one measured. Every movement purposeful. A man alone had to be disciplined or he didn't last long out here. The mountains didn't give second chances. Elias lived in a hand-built cabin 2 miles from the closest dirt road, and even that wasn't more than wheel ruts beneath packed snow. He'd been here 3 winters now, cutting timber, trapping mink and hare, trading meat for flour with a freight hauler who passed through once a month. The mail came when it came. He never checked it. He had scars down his back from Gettysburg and a limp from Chickamauga, but war wasn't what hollowed him out. That came after, when fever took his wife and boy in the same week and left the house empty except for silence and shoes no one wore anymore. He didn't plan to save anyone that day. He was thinking about sharpening his blade and boiling oats before the light failed. But then he saw something in the tree-line, barely a shape, half buried in snow, swaying against the trunk of a crooked birch. His gut told him to walk past it. Ghosts didn't get your hands cold if you didn't let them. Still, he walked toward it. Cautiously, like approaching a spooked animal. It was a girl. A woman, maybe, but too thin, her cheeks hollow and blue-lipped. Her cloak was torn, boots barely stitched together. Elias crouched, eyes scanning the forest. Someone might have left her here on purpose. But there were no other tracks, just hers, dragging in from the east, erratic and crisscrossed. Her body was curved protectively inward, arms wrapped around her belly. She was pregnant. 8 months, maybe more. He hesitated. A long moment passed while the wind screamed behind his collar. Then he slid his arms under her, lifting her as gently as if she'd break. She didn't wake, but her lips moved, whispering something. "Matthew. He sold me." She was lighter than expected. Bones and worry. Elias turned toward his cabin and carried her through the storm, boots crunching the snow crust with each careful step. Inside, he laid her on the cot by the stove. His own bed, not that he used it much. She didn't stir. Her hands were scraped and blistered. Her face looked younger in the firelight, no older than 20. He removed her boots, soaked, with one foot bruised purple and toes swollen from cold. She needed warmth first. He rubbed her feet with a wool cloth, packed snow into a basin and set it to melt for water. She groaned softly, but didn't open her eyes. He hadn't touched another human in over a year. Not like this. Not for care. The next few hours passed in ritual. Melt water. Broth with dried carrot and venison. Fire stacked high. He didn't speak. Just moved from task to task, eyes never leaving her. When she coughed, he held a cloth to her mouth. When she stirred, he placed a hand on her forehead. Burning. Not fever-hot, but heat enough to worry. In her sleep she whimpered. Mumbled names he didn't recognize. Once she said, "Please," like a prayer and reached toward the dark. He didn't sleep that night. Sat in his chair beside her, rubbing the calluses on his palm with his thumb. 100 thoughts ran through his mind, but none landed. Just flickered like ash in the wind. At dawn, the storm calmed. Pale light poured through the cracks in the shutters, revealing frost clinging to the windows. The woman stirred. Her eyes opened slowly. Cloudy, amber-brown, rimmed with fear. "You're safe," Elias said. His voice was low, rough from disuse. Storms passed. She tried to sit up. He lifted a hand, not threatening, just steady. "Rest. You're hurt." She blinked hard, taking in the room. The fire. The wood walls. Him. Her hand shot to her stomach. "The baby." "Still kicking," he said. "You need food and heat. You'll get both." She flinched when he stepped back to the stove. It wasn't mistrust exactly, more like muscle memory. Someone had hurt her often enough that kindness made her wary. He ladled broth into a tin cup and set it beside her. "When you're strong enough to talk, I'll listen. Not before." She studied him. A long silence stretched between them. Then she sipped. The warmth melted something brittle in her posture. She didn't speak again. But she didn't look away. That day passed slowly. She slept often. Elias chopped wood farther from the cabin than usual, needing the space, the rhythm. When he returned, she was awake, sitting propped up against the cot's post. "My name's Annabeth," she said. He nodded. She watched the fire. "My brother sold me to a man who trades flesh. Said I was no good to the family name. He said a pregnant girl's worth more out west than dead back home." Her voice was flat, like the words had dried out on her tongue. Elias didn't interrupt. "I ran when they stopped to water the horses. Thought I'd die in the cold." Her eyes flicked toward the window. "Maybe I still will." "No," Elias said simply. That evening, she let him change the bandage on her foot. Didn't flinch when his fingers brushed her skin. They ate beside the fire, neither speaking for a long time. Later, when she was asleep again, he sat with a knife and block of pine, carving slow shavings onto the floor. He didn't know what he was making. Maybe a horse. Maybe nothing. The storm had passed, but something else was coming. He felt it deep, in the marrow of his bones. Trouble had a way of following the broken. And now, for the first time in years, he wasn't the only broken soul inside his walls. The days blurred together, stitched by the rhythm of snow and silence. Elias rose early, tending to the woodpile, checking traps, boiling water. Annabeth, now strong enough to stand with effort, moved slower. Her belly had grown heavier, but her face no longer looked hollow. She spoke little unless spoken to. Her voice remained cautious, like someone unsure whether each word might be held against her. Elias didn't press. He wasn't a man for questions. He'd known too many answers that only ever brought grief. Still, he watched her. Watched how she winced each time she turned, how her hands hovered protectively over her stomach when a gust shook the cabin walls. Once, he caught her crying. No sound. Just her shoulders trembling as she stared into the fire. He didn't approach. He simply left his coffee mug by her side and stepped into the snow. She started helping where she could, washing tin bowls, folding wool blankets. One morning, she swept the floor, pausing to lean against the table when pain stitched through her side. Elias looked up from whittling near the hearth. "Don't push it," he said. She nodded, but her jaw tightened. Pride still clung to her, even if the world had tried to beat it out. They began sharing meals at the table, seated opposite each other like two travelers at a halfway point. Their words were few, but their silences became less sharp. One afternoon she asked, "Did you have a family?" Elias stirred the stew before answering. "Once." "What happened?" "Fever." He looked into the flames. "Took them quick." She didn't apologize or offer condolences. Just said, "I'm sorry," with enough weight behind it that it felt honest. Not pity, just shared understanding. The snow deepened outside, burying the world in white. Wolves howled more often at night, driven closer by hunger. Elias set traps farther out, wary of prints circling near the tree-line. One morning, he found claw marks on the back shed door. Bear, maybe. Maybe something hungrier. He started keeping his rifle near the hearth. Annabeth began talking in her sleep, sometimes crying. Once, she screamed a name, Matthew, before choking back a sob. Elias didn't wake her. She'd speak when ready. That moment came 3 nights later, during a thunderless snowfall that fell like ash. She stood beside the fire, hands resting on her belly, eyes shadowed and distant. "He was supposed to protect me," she said quietly. "My brother. We were all we had left after Ma died." Elias looked up from polishing his blade. He didn't interrupt. He drank. Gambled what little Pa left us. Then one day, he said a man was coming from Wyoming. Said I'd be safe with him. Her fingers curled into her shawl. The man was old. Mean. Smelled like blood and whiskey. Said he paid good money and he'd get what he bought. Elias' jaw tensed. I escaped when he fell off his horse drunk. Took his knife. Ran for days. Her voice cracked. I thought maybe I could still save something. The cabin felt heavier with her words. The fire popped once, throwing shadows across the wall. "You did save something," Elias said. She looked at him. Really looked at him for the first time. "Do you believe that?" "I do." She didn't reply. But she sat down across from him and rested both hands on her belly, fingers laced tight. That night, while Elias gathered kindling near the edge of his property, a noise stopped him, a rustle in the brush, sharp and sudden. His hand went to the axe on his belt. He turned. A figure stood just beyond the frost-coated trees. Tall, wrapped in a gray wool cloak. A fur-lined hood shadowed the face, but the eyes gleamed with familiarity. Elias raised his axe. "Still standing crooked," the man said, voice low and dry like gravel. "Guess Chickamauga didn't finish you off." Elias squinted. "2 feathers." The figure stepped closer, removing his hood. The man's hair was long, streaked with silver. Half-crow by blood, soldier by necessity, survivor by craft. They'd fought together once, bled in the same trench and parted ways when the war took more than it gave. "I heard whispers on the trail," 2 feathers said. "Of a girl, heavy with child, escaped from a trader out of Kansas. Said she ran into the mountains." Elias's shoulders stiffened. "What's it to you?" 2 feathers knelt, ran a finger across a fresh boot track in the snow. "Because someone else is looking. And he ain't a whisper." Back at the cabin, Elias stoked the fire higher than usual. Annabeth sat by the wall, her face pale. She didn't ask who the man was, only met his gaze with guarded suspicion. 2 feathers removed his gloves and nodded at her. "Ma'am." She offered a curt nod. "Who are you?" "Friend," he said. "Or close enough." Elias explained in sparse words: war, survival, trust earned in blood. 2 feathers didn't embellish. He never had. "They're no more than 2 days behind," he said. "I saw tracks. One's got boots with steel tips. Another carries a chain. The third's the kind that kills for coin." Annabeth's hand went to her belly instinctively. "Why would they come this far?" Elias asked. "Because she embarrassed them," 2 feathers answered. "And men like that don't forget humiliation." Elias paced once, twice, then stared into the fire. "We'll move at dawn." Annabeth looked up sharply. "Where would we go?" "There's a hunting cave near the south ridge. Hidden, deep. You'll be safe there." Her eyes widened. "You'd leave the cabin?" "I've left more for less." 2 feathers leaned against the wall. "We can hold them. Just need the right ground and enough patience." Elias didn't respond immediately. He stood, walked to the window, watched the snow fall over the path she'd come in on. A trail easy enough to follow if you weren't trying to hide. "They think she's alone," Elias said. "Let them." Annabeth started to speak, but he raised a hand. "I won't let them take you." She didn't cry, didn't thank him. She just stood, crossed the floor, and placed one hand over his. It was the first time she'd touched him willingly. He looked at her, eyes steady. "Rest while you can. Come morning, everything changes." And for the first time since she'd arrived, Annabeth nodded not with fear, but with something steadier, resolve. The morning broke cold and brittle. Frost clung to every surface, turning the trees into pale skeletons under a pewter sky. Elias moved quietly through the cabin, packing what little they could carry: dried venison, a pouch of oats, a canteen, a hunting knife. Every motion was efficient, practiced. He didn't speak, didn't need to. Annabeth watched from the cot, boots laced, coat buttoned over her swollen belly. She hadn't slept, but her eyes were steady. Fear was still there, yes, but underneath it lay a stubborn flame, one that refused to be snuffed out. 2 feathers scouted ahead. He returned shortly before dawn, his expression unreadable but his steps urgent. "They're close," he said. "Half a day behind, maybe less. One's got a dog." Elias nodded once. "We lead them west. You take Annabeth to the ridge cave." 2 feathers glanced at her, then back to Elias. "You sure?" "She's what they want," Elias said. "If they see me, they won't be looking for her." Annabeth stood. "You can't go alone." "I've been alone for years," he replied, strapping on his rifle. I know how to make noise, how to disappear. You get to that cave and stay out of sight." Her jaw clenched, but she didn't argue. She stepped toward him and hesitated, then placed a hand on his arm. "Don't die out there." "I don't plan to." His voice softened, just enough. Too stubborn for that. By mid-morning, they separated. Two Feathers and Annabeth disappeared into the timberline, taking the high trail through the cliffs. Elias veered low, dragging a loose pack to leave a visible trail. He snapped branches, left boot prints wide and obvious. The forest swallowed him whole. The hunters came fast. Elias first heard them near Bear Creek, shouted curses, the metallic jingle of spurs, the dog's low snarl. He climbed a ledge and looked down. 3 men on horseback, rifles slung across their backs, faces hard with intent. One of them wore a red bandana and kept slapping the dog with a length of rope. The dog pulled against its lead, nose to the ground. Elias didn't wait. He moved upstream, leaving deeper tracks, leading them toward Wolf's Hollow, a dead end with high bluffs and unstable rock. He knew the land. They didn't. Snow began to fall again by afternoon, light but steady. Enough to muffle sound, not enough to hide him. He doubled back twice, cut across fallen trees, and rigged a snare on the trail. When the dog's yelp split the air an hour later, Elias allowed himself one breath of satisfaction before moving again. He was tired. The limp in his leg dragged more with each mile. But he didn't stop. The farther he led them, the safer she'd be. That thought alone lit a fire beneath his ribs. Back at the cave, Annabeth labored through slow breathing, sweat slicking her brow. 2 Feathers kept watch at the mouth, his rifle balanced on a rock. He checked on her only once every hour, saying little, watching her carefully. "She's early," he muttered to himself. Annabeth gritted her teeth through a wave of pain. "The baby doesn't care about timing." 2 Feathers nodded, impressed despite himself. "You've got grit, girl. Hold on to it." Elias reached the hollow by dusk. The bluffs towered around him, and the canyon floor narrowed to a wedge of shale and ice. He hunkered behind a fallen log, waited. The riders came slowly, one leading the limping dog, another chewing tobacco with exaggerated disdain. "Tracks end here," one barked. "He's boxed in." Elias raised his rifle. One shot cracked the silence, clean, sharp. The man with the dog dropped hard, snow blooming red beneath him. Chaos erupted. The horses reared, men ducked and shouted. Elias didn't fire again. He slipped away under cover of the panic, moving uphill fast and silent. A second man chased him, clambering up the rocks. Elias waited behind a boulder, then smashed the butt of his rifle into the man's skull as he crested the ledge. The body tumbled down without grace. But the third man didn't retreat. No, he moved differently, slower, smarter. Elias heard him circling behind, boots deliberate, gaze patient. A hunter, not a thug. They met in the clearing above the bluff, rifles drawn. "You're protecting her," the man said. His voice was low, with a southern drawl dipped in venom. "She's not yours." "She's not yours either," Elias said. "She cost me $300. And my name." He spat into the snow. "You got no idea who I am." "I don't care who you are." Elias leveled the rifle. The man smiled. "You gonna shoot a man point blank? In cold blood?" "I've done worse for better people." The shot echoed through the trees. By the time Elias limped into the cave clearing, night had fallen and firelight flickered from within. He staggered, blood staining his coat from a graze on his side. 2 Feathers caught him by the arm. "You look like hell," he said. "I've seen worse." Annabeth cried out from inside the cave. Elias paled. "Is she?" 2 Feathers nodded. "She's delivering. Strong." Elias dropped to sit beside the fire, breathing hard. His hands shook, not from cold, but from something deeper. Something hollowed and stirred. An hour passed. Then 2. And then, a sound, a sharp, newborn cry, thin but alive. Elias froze, every muscle tensing as if the sound could break him apart. His breath caught. Annabeth emerged from the cave entrance a short while later, pale, exhausted, but standing. In her arms, wrapped in a wool coat, a tiny bundle squirmed. She stepped toward him, eyes shining. "It's a girl." Elias stood slowly. His legs didn't want to cooperate, but he moved anyway. The fire between them flickered as he stepped closer, and she held out the child. "She doesn't have a name," Annabeth said. "But I was thinking, maybe you'd want to choose it." He looked down at the infant. Red-faced, eyes shut tight, small fingers curled around nothing. He swallowed hard. "Clara," he said. "That was my wife's name." Annabeth nodded, no hesitation. "Then Clara it is." They stood like that for a moment, man, woman, child, under the shadow of cliffs and stars. The wind was no longer cruel. It moved like a whisper, brushing the snow from pine needles in gentle sighs. Elias reached out, touching the baby's head. Something broke in his chest, not pain this time, but something else. Something healing. The forest still stretched wild and full of threats. The road ahead would not be easy. But for the first time in years, Elias felt the world tilt forward again, not toward grief, but toward purpose. A new beginning, born from the wreckage. And for now, that was enough. The winter thaw came late that year. Long after the blizzards had passed and the howls of wolves faded into memory, the mountains remained cloaked in ice and silence. But in the cave above the timberline, life stirred where death had once hovered. Clara, bundled tightly in stitched wool and cradled against Annabeth's chest, no longer cried like a stranger to the world. Her small lungs had found rhythm, her eyes opened more often now, bright and searching. Elias stood just outside the cave mouth, staring at the horizon where the snow gave way to the dark line of pine. He no longer wore grief like armor. There were new lines around his eyes now, not just from age, but from something else. Hope, perhaps. Or the weight of second chances. Each day he hunted with quiet urgency, never straying far. He returned before dusk without fail, laying down fresh meat and smoked trout beside the fire with silent gratitude. Annabeth never asked what he saw in the woods, and he never told her the truth, that he still watched the trail, still expected retribution for the blood he spilled. He didn't fear it, but he respected its possibility. 2 feathers remained for a time, helping with the child, keeping watch from the ridge. His presence brought a strange calm. He said little but saw much. One night, as the baby slept between them, he finally spoke. "You think they'll stay away?" Elias asked, his voice low. "No," 2 feathers answered, poking the fire. "But not soon. Word travels slow through blood. You've got time." "How much?" "Enough to become something worth protecting." Elias considered that, then nodded. When spring cracked the ice and green licked at the edge of the valley, they moved back to the cabin. The journey was slow, careful. Elias cleared the path ahead while Annabeth rode in the small sled he'd fashioned from pine and elk hide. Clara nestled in her arms, blinking at the world with wonder. The cabin had survived the storms, though the roof sagged from snow weight. Elias worked without pause, patching, hammering, strengthening every beam. He built a new crib from aspen branches and placed it near the hearth. A new beginning, constructed piece by piece. In time, the rhythms of life returned. Elias taught Annabeth to snare rabbits and fish the cold stream. She, in turn, showed him how to wrap Clara in tight swaddles, how to calm her cries with soft humming. It became a kind of unspoken pact, each giving the other what they lacked. They moved like survivors learning to live, not just endure. But peace is a fragile thing in wild country. One morning, while checking the trapline near Black Birch Hollow, Elias noticed something strange. Tree bark freshly gouged, not by animals, but by blades. A crude symbol carved into the trunk, a triangle over a cross. A sign he hadn't seen since his army days. He returned to the cabin with a heavy silence wrapped around him. Annabeth noticed immediately. "What is it?" He handed her the fish without speaking, then went to the rifle. The next days were spent preparing. Quietly, thoughtfully. He dug a new root cellar, deep enough to hide a person. Reinforced the cabin door with a steel plate from an old wagon. 2 feathers returned briefly with news. Traders down in Dunmore mentioned a group of bounty men passing through, asking about a girl and a woodsman who'd left a mess in Kansas territory. "They're slow," 2 feathers said. "But they're coming." Elias turned to Annabeth that night as the baby slept. "You still have a choice. I can get you to the town by the river. You'll be safe with the nuns." Annabeth looked at him, then at Clara. "No. They took everything from me once. I won't run again." He didn't press. Because he knew, she wasn't the girl who had stumbled through the snow months ago. She had fire now. And roots. The final test came one stormy dusk. They arrived with little sound, 3 shadows dismounting at the edge of the clearing. Not the same men from before. These were leaner, hungrier, more patient. Hired wolves sent to clean up a stain. Elias stood at the door, rifle in hand, heart slow and steady. Annabeth waited inside, Clara swaddled tight in a hidden crawlspace beneath the floorboards. 2 Feathers watched from the ridge with his longbow ready. "You Elias Burke," the lead man called, his voice hoarse. "I am. Got something don't belong to you." Elias stepped forward, slowly. "She ain't something. And she belongs to no one." "Wrong answer." The first shot cracked, splintering the porch rail. Elias ducked behind a barrel, returning fire with precision. The air thickened with smoke and shouting. 2 Feathers let loose an arrow from above, silent, deadly. One man dropped, clutching his throat. Another charged the door with a hatchet. Elias met him head-on, tackled him into the snow, wrestling for control. Blood sprayed the drift as the blade found flesh. The last man, tall, scarred, with cold eyes, burst through the back window. He landed hard on the floorboards and found Annabeth waiting. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She lifted Elias's backup rifle and fired once, point-blank. When it was over, Elias limped into the cabin, soaked with blood and melted snow. Annabeth sat on the floor, hands shaking, the rifle across her lap. Clara cried softly from beneath the boards. "You all right?" he asked, voice hoarse. She nodded. "We're still here." Elias dropped to one knee, exhaling. "That's all that matters." The cleanup took a day. Graves were dug far from the cabin, marked only by stone. 2 Feathers left quietly, leaving behind a single hawk feather at the door, his wordless blessing. Weeks passed. The land bloomed in earnest, green and wide beneath open sky. Clara took her first steps in the soft grass near the cabin. Annabeth laughed, loud and unguarded, as she chased after her daughter. Elias watched from the porch, heart full in a way he never thought possible again. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Annabeth sat beside him with a soft smile. "You built all this to survive," she said. "But somehow we learned to live." Elias looked out over the hills. "I never expected it." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Neither did I." The wind rustled the pine trees gently, like breath against the earth. And though the world beyond still carried danger, heartbreak, and wild uncertainty, within these woods, within this chosen family, there was something stronger than fear. There was peace. Earned. And fiercely protected.